Hello and welcome to Stampscaping 101. We're going to try some photo stamping with a couple of the new nature set images. This is a photograph of some clouds, and I have those available for free downloads on my Flickr account, or you can download a bunch of different types of background sky types of imagery off of the directly from the Facebook group, and a lot of people besides myself have posted background photos on there that you can download and print out on your inkjet printer. I happen to get a lot of these prints done at the same time from places like Shutterfly, or at my local CVS type of thing. And there's a couple different things. If you order it online, it seems like if you get them printed out at your CVS or whatever these days, it seems to go to like some kind of central printing place, and they don't print out on standard photo paper like before, where it's getting printed with printer inks or something like that. So you can't use things like water-based inks to print out your images on these prints. Now, if you're printing them out at home, you can. I would suggest using dye-based inks, because that's my favorite technique of using photographs. It's to print them out in dye-based inks, and dye-based inks are water-based inks, and then I can go in and I can add additional color with alcohol markers, all right? Because alcohol and water wouldn't mix. But I'm having to stamp onto these online ordered prints that don't seem to take water-based media. I don't know why they're sealed off with something, so it requires me to use StazOn ink. So the techniques that I like to use in photo stamping aren't all available to me, but let's see what we can do here. To get some, I don't know, some types of effects on here. Okay, so StazOn with this larger tree. This tree is on set number 53, I think. Gosh, it's hard to think of how many sets I have these days. All right, so that StazOn works pretty well on this type of paper, and it'll dry just fine. StazOn ink is a solvent ink, and it's kind of akin to like almost using like a Sharpie pen type of ink, Sharpie marker, permanent marker on your stamps. Okay, so this is clouds, but I don't want this. I mean, you can just stamp images over the background and have that be sky, and that's really cool looking. But I want this to look like it's a kind of a snowy terrain, so we'll put some other imagery in here. All right. And some of the cloud images, sky images that I have there's heavy kind of a contrast between cloud and like open blue sky, or some of them are like that. But a lot of mine, I decrease the contrast between the background and the cloud so that you can kind of stamp over it and have, different areas of your background represent different things, without so much contrast. So you just get some kind of mottled texturing in the background. It's a fun way to stamp and kind of approach your scenes. And what I mean by that is if there was like a heavy contrast, like absolute white cloud and absolute blue sky, then you would see all that blue sky showing through the open areas on stamps that have open areas like this, okay? If they're just all silhouette solid images, then you can stamp anything over the background of any type of, contrasting imagery. But anything with open areas, here's a cabin like this. Oh, here would be like an open rooftop, it would show right through that. Okay, so this one is going to have some horses running in here. And I have this reflection area down here, and I don't necessarily want this to look like they're running in water. Okay, I want it to look more like kind of somewhat of a winter terrain. So I'm just going to ink up that portion of the horses. I might go a little bit lower though. Like about like that. I don't know if you can see that on your cameras, but I've inked up about half of the reflection area. And I'm going to wipe off some of that so that it stamps out drier and hopefully lighter in appearance, so it just looks like shadows, hopefully. Okay. Now, there's a lot of silhouette on those, so some of that area on the horses didn't fill in, which happens on kind of non-porous surfaces. Now, again, if you're printing this out, backgrounds on your home inkjet printer and you just use your standard dye-based inks, those work extremely well on photo paper. Okay, you'll get a really crisp impression, but I'll show you how I fill this in here. Kind of those open areas like that. There's a little bit of that texturing like that where the ink didn't transfer, but that's not a problem. I always have my Sharpie pen here, and like I said, Stays on Ink is almost like printing out in Sharpie, so you can always fill it in. Now this is where, too, see, I don't have a lot of different Stays on colors. I have black, and I have a white pad, okay? But if this was printed on my home inkjet printer, okay, I'd be able to use any color of dye-based inks that I have to print this out. And so I'd probably go with like a gray tinged background tree instead of the black that I'm going to use right here. But I'll show you what I do with these trees here. I'm going to have this, I don't want a hard delineation right here. I want it to look like it's going back into the clouds. So I'm going to wipe this off. I'm wiping it off really good on the bottom. And then I'm slowly kind of transitioning it up there, where I'm taking off a little bit less ink. Got to work fast when you're using Stays on it starts drying on your stamp, you know, almost the instant you lay it down. So see how that transitions from dark to light like that. See, and I didn't want that hard line right above my horses, so instead it's in grayscale. It looks like they're running through, I don't know, like a heavy misty type of scenario. Let's put another one right back in here. I'll put it up a little bit higher, and when you go a little bit higher on your scenes, what that represents is objects that are farther off in the distance, okay? I inked up about 2/3 of this or so, and we'll do the same thing. I'll wipe it off on the bottom, pretty heavy on the bottom, and then I'm transitioning it up top. Maybe this one I'll make a little bit lighter. I think, I don't know if I've removed exactly the amount that I think, but we'll see. Sometimes if you stamp it higher, objects that are more distant look lighter in value. Okay, maybe I removed more off this one. Okay, and right over here we have this open area. Why don't I ink up a little bit of this side, and we'll go for a little bit of that. I'll be stamping it right around my foreground tree, so why don't we do this right here? I'll blot it off like that, removing a lot of the ink overall, and then I'll wipe it off like that, and we'll go up here, and hopefully I'll get a lighter impression. I mean, that it's darker, you know, it's not going to ruin anything. See that right there? Maybe I didn't remove enough of that. Or maybe I removed too much of that on the bottom. This is scenic stamping for you people. If I seem rather nonchalant and kind of indifferent as opposed to kind of some results, it's because I am, because you can always just add a little bit more if something doesn't come out as intended. See that? I just added some more texturing like that. Right around in here, that looks a little bit bare to me, so I'll put another tree texture down there. It might not read as a tree, but it might just read as some extra, you know, a little bit of extra texturing like that. Okay. Actually, they could be running on, you know, a very shallow pond or something like that. Probably not on ice. They'd be slipping around everywhere. All right, now let's see what we can do here with some additional texturing. Okay, I have like a snow texture stamp. Okay, I thought I was going to have to go find it. I have it right here. And let's see. I need a block with some tack and peel on it. Here we go. This is an acrylic block with this material called tack and peel on here, and it just provides a block with, you know, where you can temporarily adhere your rubber stamps to. Rubber isn't inherently tacky like a clear stamp, you know, so it would just fall right off of the block if I didn't use some kind of temporary mounting method. I mean, you can even put a piece of like double stick tape on this or something if you don't have anything handy. But tack and peel, you can put it on once and it lasts forever. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to add in some of this snowy texture here. This. And again, that would be kind of cool if it was in, you know, like a blue tone or something like that. Okay, I'm going to go for a real light impression, kind of in this back area. Hopefully I'm kind of controlling whatever, dampness, wetness. See that right kind of texture right in there? And we have that little area right in there. Just adding some kind of little texturing like that can kind of, it anchors down this area down below a little bit more than not having texture, okay? And it just changes it a little bit from, you know, the inherent cloudy, misty look in there, which maybe you include in there and, you know, have it in there. It might look a little bit more, I don't know, whatever, mystical or something like that. Okay, let's go back to these horses now. I didn't want to add this in right away because although that Stays on ink dries really fast, it doesn't dry like in, you know, a few microseconds or something like that. Let's just go in and we'll fill this in and you'll see it kind of matches pretty good. I kind of dot it too if it looks like, if I kind of scribble back and forth sometimes, this pen will start kind of almost removing ink, okay? So you kind of, you know, it depends on how wet your marker is. If it's super juicy, then you can kind of scribble around because it's going to be transferring more. But this one's about medium, so I'm kind of dotting a little bit. Sometimes you got to layer it a little bit like this. It's easier on this type of paper like this, but if you're doing this, a lot of times I'm using mirrored cardstocks like silver and gold and trying to stamp on them with Stays on ink. Those ones, it gets a little bit tricky, so, you know, the pen comes in handy for that too, but kind of get the feel of it, you know. There's kind of a little bit of a touch that you want to get to, you know, the transferring of a tone. Or, I don't know, whatever, Sharpie marker. Okay, so this is where I wish I can go in and really color this. I think if I use some light blues on here, that might smear. Now you could wait for Stays on to dry overnight, and that might help a little bit where you can go into this with a alcohol marker, kind of lighter. If you have a super, super juicy alcohol marker, then it might just dissolve all that black and smear it around. But sometimes you can get a really light touch of it. Let's try to do that. Seemed like this one would be fun. There's a little sledder guy going through here. Or you can put, I don't know. This could be a move, you know, it could be like a misty morning. This could have been water down here. You could put like a moose in a reflection or something like that. Okay, let's see. Well, let's go ahead and color. Let's give this a shot. I don't know if this is going to work. Like I said, maybe that's a little bit too bright of a blue. Let's go for something a little bit more mellow. Let's give this a try here. See, I'm just kind of going like this so that I don't want to scribble around too much. And I'm doing this in the open area of this tree, just to give this tree a little bit of tone. All right. Yeah, it's giving it a little bit of kind of mass. This is kind of the same colors right up here too, so it kind of integrates the objects into the scene a little bit more. I really want to put some down here in the shadow area. Yeah, see, if I put it down here on these little textures of, whatever shaded textures, I feel like I'm going to kind of be smearing the tone around a little bit. Going with a little bit of speed probably helps. Like I'm just doing it really fast where I'm not scribbling around like this, giving the tone that's in that area, the impressions, the stays on impressions, time to dissolve and smear. Let's just do that right there. And let's see if I have a pretty light. Here's a light gray. Oh, good. This gray is kind of dry. I'll still be kind of careful about it. All right, something like that. All right, now those are kind of some harsh additions there of tone. Let me see. I hardly ever use it, but let's see if I have my blender pen around. My alcohol blender pen. Is this a blender pen? No, that's color. I'm missing the tops for some of these things. Let me look for my blender pen. Okay, clear blender pen here. Let me just see if I can just kind of blend some of those tones. It should put the alcohol right back into solution because it's kind of just sitting right on top of the surface of this paper here and not absorbing at all. Okay, I don't want to do too much. I didn't do a lot of coloring, so I don't have to do too much anyway, but I would do a little bit more, again, if this were dye-based inks on here. Okay, now, here's one of the things that you can do with ease, and that's I'm going to go in and add in some extra texturing into these trees. Okay, now you can see the patterning of the background of the cloudy sky is in some of these areas within this tree, but I can bring out more textured kind of lighting and opacity, so the tree is not just going to be showing like see-through into the sky area if I put some of this down here. This is a 3mm and a 0.7mm paint pen, okay? And I'll just add some of these little... See, so I'm adding that. Oh, that's really bright. It dries a little bit darker than what it looks like when it's been freshly applied. But boy, that really stands out on there. Kind of looks strange if you put it in like one little area like that because it's so light in this case. But what we'll do is we'll bring it around into more of the visuals, more of the, I don't know, scenario, and it will hopefully look, somewhat natural. Where again, if you put like a couple dots down there, it really stands out like a lot. So you bring this amount of lightness into other areas of your scenario, and it just becomes part of the lighting scheme. Now again, this is a really fat pen, but you can use a much thinner one, which I'll do here in a minute. Put little sparkles down here. This area right in here gets pretty dark, so I need to be careful about that. Let's transition to the 0.7 millimeter extra fine tip. Now you don't have to do this step right here. I thought it looked pretty cool without it, but I do like adding in these little details into my scenes. I think for something like snow, it gives the snow a little bit of a shimmery texture. I'm going to have some lighting coming through here because that just happens to be where it's really light in the scene. So we'll say some light is kind of flooding through that little area. And maybe these horses are running through the snow, so they're kicking up some snow. Kind of looks really strange right now, but I'll be bringing in some white pigment ink into here, and that, that integrates everything. I'd really strongly suggest, if you like scenic stamping, playing around with some of the white pigment ink additions into your pieces. I can't tell you how many times it just kind of resolves all of my different techniques and faults within the techniques, and things like that. When I use that white pigment ink, it pretty much remedies everything. Good applications, it makes them look better. Good of less than great applications, it can really save the day a lot of times. Okay. That should be drying pretty fast. I won't wait too long. Let's get a cotton ball, 100% cotton ball. And I use a Brilliance ink. You could probably use any type of white pigment ink. The surface isn't porous, okay, but you're going to be laying down pigment ink really thin on this surface right here. You wouldn't be able to stamp something on here in, white oil-based pigment ink, which all pigment inks are, except for the Brilliance, which is a water-based. The water-based will dry on just about any surface. It might not adhere to certain surfaces really well, where you can spray seal it, but this one should be just fine. In terms of the amount of ink that I'm going to be applying on here, it's a really thin layer. Okay, so I transition these trees going from dark to light on the bottom, and I'm adding in some extra little light, a thin layer of this ink down here at the base of it again, just to kind of reiterate that transitioning value going from light to dark. So I'm adding in some white right over the top of that. So if I didn't get kind of a nice transition tone down there, you can just do it again with pigment ink as opposed to just, having a drier ink at the base of the imagery. Now see how that's going from light down here, because that's where I'm adding the white pigment ink, but that's also where it was dry on the impression. Now, see right down here on these horses. Now I could have wiped off some of the ink off the horses, but for that small area on these horses, around their legs and hoofs and everything like that, I kind of prefer to handle that, after the fact, as opposed to just stamping them darker down below like this. So I can add in, just as much of this white as I want to, where if you're just kind of wiping off the stamp and then getting the impression, sometimes it's, it's kind of hard to tell how dark it's going to be. It depends on what ink you're using and how much ink you remove off it, how wet your pad is, stuff like that. But this is a pretty controlled application here. All right, so adding this down like that. I think that looks pretty good like that. So see, I have some of this white ink right in here. And then I don't have too much right through here, but I'm adding it right down here. Now let's go and add it down here. So you get this kind of softer type of cloud formation up there. Then you get crisp imagery, soft, crisp, soft, some crisp right here. And then you can go in like this and bring in some additional softness like that. So it's like you're oscillating textures. It's kind of light too. It's, darker, lighter, that type of thing too. So what it's doing is it's bringing in some variation, textural variation, lighting variation. You do it all in one technique right here. And the only thing you want to do is, everyone that does this the first time, they have way too much ink on here. When I'm doing this, I'm really, my pad isn't very, it's really kind of dry, but what you really want to do is you really want to remove a lot of the ink off of here if you have a really wet ink pad, so that it's more akin to like you're adding in some like powder into the piece, like dry powder or something like that. That's the kind of the concept. So it's like you're just dabbing in a little bit at a time. Some people can't see it, because they're not used to dabbing in like a really small amount of something and building it up like that. They're used to getting a mark as a mark, okay? But in this method here, for me, it's a dry brush type of technique. And you have a lot of control over the end result, because it just, I'm just kind of building up more and more of this tone as I apply it in here, but it's not like a big like blob of white. It just looks a little bit lighter every time I kind of work that area a little bit. You can use different things if there's a more targeted little area that you want to get. Maybe use something like a Q-tip or something like that. See this right here? I went across this tree right here, so it looks like the light is hitting it kind of in that area. Anyway, that is it. You get it framed off, put a little word stamp or something like that up there. Actually, maybe I'll look for a word stamp. Maybe I can put something right up there. Let me see if I have a word stamp that'll fit this composition. All right, I think I found one that I want to use. Peace on Earth. Excuse my head. Okay. Nice even pressure. I have that right there. Peace on Earth. And that's off of this Scenic Sentiment set. And you just get that kind of, mounted up right there. And I think you have a pretty cool card. starting off with that photo in the background is a good way to go to, it's, I wouldn't say it eliminates kind of any need for coloring, and although I didn't really need too much of it in here, if I needed it at all, really, we could have just stamped everything out and used the markers, the white markers and the pigment ink in there to finish it off. But again, if you print out these cloud types of background papers on your own home inkjet printer onto matte, semi-gloss, or glossy photo paper, you can use all kinds of different colors. You can blend your marker tones into your scene, and that's really fun to do. And again, it shouldn't affect the impressions if you stamp them out in a dye-based, water-based ink, because alcohol and water won't mix, so it's a really good way to utilize that. And then if you go back in with your water-based brilliance ink to tone in like that over the top of the dye and alcohol ink combinations, it works really fantastic. On something like this paper, it works too, but you just have to use a little bit more of a specialty type of ink in the form of the StazOn. All right. Anyways, hope you liked the card. Thanks so much for watching Stampscapes 101.